Hello, happy Easter. I hope that all of you had a lovely day. And the story I'm going to tell you today is I would call it a hamlet because it is a tiny little place that is about 35 minutes away. Or if you're coming from the center of Bremen, it'd be a little bit more like 45. But it is a town called Worpswede, which is an artist village. And the first time that this town was mentioned in any of the records, it was in the year 1218. So, it's not that old. Hello, hello. um, it is northeast of Bremen, and when you get out there, it is incredibly flat, although there is one small hill. It's not a mountain. I think it's called the Weierberg. But what is so unique about this area is that it is the moorland of northern Germany. It does have some really, really beautiful white stem birches mixed in, with these swampy areas where they used to cut the peat moss, and then they put it in these big wooden boats, and they had big paddles that they would shove down into the little river and take it all the way to Bremen. I mean, it's really not a river. It's like the Wimmer is really narrow, but it really was a sleepy village. Like I said, in 1218, I believe it was 8 farmers and their families moved out there. And so for hundreds of years, that's all it was. There was not much happening. But then, I believe in 1888, there were 3 artists from Düsseldorf, which is south of Bremen, who somehow discovered Worpswede, and they went, oh my God, this is spectacular. So they settled there, and that's how this started. The 3 first artists that came were all painters. But then in, I believe it was 1901, the very famous German poet Rainer Maria Rilke came out there, and he was absolutely enamored with it. Which is easy to do because once you go there, it is so charming that you just go, oh my God, you've got to be kidding. I was lucky that I met, he was a boy because we were 15, and his name was Andreas Hofmeier. And Andreas lived in Worpswede with his mother, Tulu. And when I met him, he said, oh, you've got to come visit us because, you're going to love it where I live. And my mother is going to like you because she really wanted a girl, and that sort of didn't work out. And so I did. I went out there on the bus, and it was true. I mean, I immediately liked Tulu. To me, she was very interesting. She had this incredible old farmhouse that had a big reed roof. It was quite a large home. The living room was sunken, and it had this beautiful old kitchen. At that point, she owned a lot of land. She had inherited all of this from her parents, and she was sort of a well-known fixture in Worpswede because one of the things outside of the house, there was a very large meadow. And on the left side was it looked like a tea house, but it wasn't. It just happened to be octagonal. And she rented that to a sculptor. And then a little bit further down on the right, there was a little cottage, and he was a painter. And then after that, you had woods and trees. But what she did, and this is what she was known for, that once a month, she would have what she called her cultural Sunday. And of course, what was just brilliant, she was nice enough because she really liked me. And like I said, we really got along extremely well. She would invite me. So Andreas and I were the only kids or young people that were there. Everybody else was either a sculptor or a painter or a poet. And we would sit around in this fabulous big living room, this sunken living room, and it would always start off by her saying that, oh, you know, we should really listen to this. And it would be some type of classical music, and we would all listen to it. And then afterwards, a big discussion would start over the piece that we had heard. Sometimes it was from an opera. And the other person that she would invite was her ex-husband, who I believe was a lawyer in Bremen, but I could be wrong about that. But what was so brilliant about a young girl, and that's what I was back then, was to be exposed to all these artists. And the two that rented the places on our property, they allowed me to come over, and actually the painter asked me once, you know, he said, if you ever want to stay here, that's fine. But I mean, I could stay with Tulu. But it was lovely. And she knew, of course, everybody in town, which was absolutely wonderful. And to be exposed to all of these people that were so talented was just the most wonderful thing for me. Since at that time I had decided I wanted to be a painter, that just seemed like the perfect place. And when I realized, I mean, that would have been the only place in Germany that I would have wanted to stay in, and that was Worpswede. But there was just no way that I could do that. I needed to go to art school. I didn't have any money to just move out there. So it was a little bit sad, but you know, that's life. You know, you make another plan. If one plan doesn't work, okay, then get to another one. But when I go to Bremen, I always make it a point. I always go to Worpswede. Of course, now it has almost 300 artists there. It's gotten much bigger. It has a lot of art galleries, and some of the buildings are just absolutely fabulous. They are impressionistic. Vogler, the first guy that bought a farmhouse there and said, oh, I'm going to fix it up, you know, he sort of changed it so that it would look more like something that he would like. And a lot of artists, like I said, followed. And like I just mentioned, Rainer Maria Rilke had gone out there, and he married a sculptor who consequently bought a beautiful old home in Fischerhude. This place looks right out of a fairy tale. She had her studio on the ground floor, and it's very close to a little river called the Wümme. That was the river that they took to go into town to sell the peat moss. And now Café Rilke, if you want to look it up, it's Rilka. It's in Fischerhude. It is the most charming place. There are more flowers than you can imagine. And the cakes are what they call homemade. They're like from in the olden days, you know, they're all absolutely delicious, but they're the type of cake that anybody in northern Germany that is a good baker could bake themselves. They do not look like they came out of a patisserie in Vienna or a big city in Bremen. It's the most charming place, like I keep saying. I'm enamored with this place. It's wonderful in the summer. You can sit outside. And it's definitely one of my favorite places. I think what's really interesting that 3 painters just sort of happened to find Worpswede and then attracted all of these very famous people. The woman that Rilke married was a very famous sculptor, and she had actually studied in Paris with Rodin. And there are a ton of beautiful paintings that people did then. And I like the old paintings that were done, you know, like between 19 and 1920, because they show this very beautiful countryside the way it used to look. I mean, it still looks the same, but of course the artists now that live there, they're not interested in that. Everything is ultra modern, and that's wonderful. That's what happens. Things change. But I happen to like the paintings from in the olden days. The other thing is that, you know, if I would not have met Andreas, I doubt very much that I would have been privileged to be able to go out there. One very significant thing that happened with Tulu is that she frequently would sponsor artists. And at one point, she sponsored an American jazz group to come over, and they were going to have a really big concert in Bremen, of course, not out there. And she said to me one day, hey, listen, you've got to meet us in town because I have a surprise for you. And I mean, I could not believe it. I had no idea what she was talking about. But when I got there, it was like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding. There were these 3 Americans, and since she had brought them over there, I mean, she had sponsored them. So I'm pretty sure that she paid for them, you know, to get over there. And so after the concert, she said, come here, you know, you've got to meet them. So Andreas and I thought, oh my God, this is so much fun. We're going to meet Americans. Oh, wow, this is so much fun. The only other black person that I had ever seen was a soldier. And in one of my stories, I talked about that, where I was very small then. And I pulled on my mother's hand and I said, oh, Mama, look, it's an Osterhase, Schokoladen Osterhase. I said, here is an Easter bunny made out of chocolate. And I ran over to him. I grabbed his hand and I kissed his hand. And I remember looking up at him, and he had tears in his eyes. And I thought, oh, I wonder, did I hurt him? And then he patted me on the head and smiled. So I knew that that wasn't it. But later, a woman talked to my mother, and she said, there's really something wrong with you people. I saw you when you let your little girl run over to that, you know, N-word. I don't want to say it. And she grabbed his hand and kissed his hand, and that's revolting. And that you did not tell your daughter that that's horrible behavior, I cannot believe. And my mother just said, well, I'm so sorry, but I don't really want to talk to you about that, but this is not what we think. Well, you people are weird. We just want you to go away. Why don't you go where you came from? And my mother would think, this is weird because guess what? Yeah, my parents are Hungarian, but I was born here. But what was interesting with these 3 jazz musicians, that one of them asked Tulu whether she would have time to take him through Bremen and really show him all of the wonderful architecture and sort of explain some of that stuff. And she said, you know what, I hope you don't mind, but this little girl here, her English is infinitely better than mine. So I'm wondering, would you go with her? And then she asked me, and I said, oh yes, of course, that would be so much fun. I can show him how wonderful Bremen is. I'll take him to the Schnorr, and I'll go in the Böttcherstraße, and I'll show him City Hall and St. Peter's, and oh, he's just gonna love it. Okay, so I made a date, you know, with this 6'1" black guy, and here I'm like, you know, I'm 15, so I don't think I was 5'4" yet. I think I was still like 5'2". Anyway, so I met him in town, and I showed him all of Bremen, and then he said, is there anything that you would really like to do? And I said, well, I hope that it's okay, but there's this cafe that I really like that's right in the center. And he said, oh, the place where we stopped, and you pointed at. I said, yeah, that place called Cafe Stecker. Could we please go there? And he said, well, of course. So, oh God, we went there, and I actually got to have a cup of coffee with milk instead of cafe verkeerd, which is, you know, lots of milk and a little bit of coffee in it. And I got to have a piece of cake, which of course was very sweet. And then, you know, off I went. So here's the backlash. And this played a very big role in why I had several reasons why I ran away from home shortly thereafter, actually. But this played a very big role in it. The next day, my mother came home from work and she said, oh, well, she said, I guess there's a lot of ruffled feathers again. I guess they really, really don't like us here. And I said, why? What happened? And she said, well, guess what? A mother of one of your friends came to Ployce. That's where my mother was the buyer. It was a ladies' and men's clothing store. And she said this lady came and said that she needed to talk to me because she had a complaint. And the complaint was that I was to keep you away from your friends because you were obviously a very, very, very bad influence. And we will delve into this later. And that was actually true because I was telling my friends that were all a lot older and from very, very prominent and wealthy families. I was actually telling them that if they were not happy having to go into their parents' businesses, that they should talk to their parents and tell them that, no, I love you very much, but I don't want to do that. Like my friend Didi, he did not want to do that. He wanted to become a captain. He wanted to go all over the world. And I said, Didi, tell your mom, you need to. Well, he didn't. But word had gotten out that I was obstinate and I was sowing very bad seeds in all these kids' minds by telling them that they should think for themselves. I'm 15. These guys are all between like 17 and 20. But apparently you don't do that. Not in northern Germany and maybe nowhere. I don't know. But especially in those days, no, this was totally not acceptable. And she said, you keep her away because she's bad news. And, you know, we just think that she's a little whore. My mother went, excuse me? What? She said, well, we saw her yesterday, you know, with that big black guy. Of course, they didn't call him a black guy. They called him something else. The big N-word that we no longer say in America. And my mother was just, she didn't know whether to start crying or whether to start laughing or whether to take something and throw it at her, because that was my mother's usual reaction. When she got really upset, she'd throw something. So most of our dishes were broken most of the time. But my mother was just stunned. And she said, no, you know, if that's what you think, I'm really sorry because you have no idea what she's like. She cooks, she cleans, she does the laundry. She has a job in addition going to school. But I'm really sorry that you feel that way. And this woman said, well, we know what she's up to. She just wants to get knocked up by one of our sons so that she can marry one of our nice sons. And my mother said, I don't think so. First of all, I know for a fact she's not having sex. Second of all, as soon as she can, she's going to leave. I know that. Well, little did she know, the plan was that I was going to emigrate to the U.S. when I was 18. We had talked about that. But I had not divulged that in about a month or so, I was going to run away from home and go to England because I had had it. I just could no longer put up with the way that people behaved there. And when she told me that, I said, Oh, Mama, I can't wait to be 18 because this is absolutely horrible. I can't believe that that's what they're saying. And she said, well, she gave me a big hug and she said, that's okay. You know, I will start writing to my sister in Trenton, New Jersey, and I will ask her if when you're 18, whether they will sponsor you. And I'm pretty sure that that they will do that. So there you go. That's my story for today. And please subscribe and leave a comment. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Love you.